So guys, what was previously ISQC1, quality control for firms that perform audits, has now been replaced with ISQM1, which is just quality management for firms that perform audits or reviews of financial statements. The nice thing, guys, yes, it's a change in standard, but the principles remain the same. It's all about trying to ensure that there is quality when audits are accepted, or how we go about accepting audits, deciding whether or not to accept an audit. And there's a quality standard at which they need to perform the engagements, at which they need to ensure the firm operates. Okay, so yes, new standard, but don't freak out. It is a level 2 in terms of our psycho knowledge levels, so I only want to focus on where I believe it will be tested, and that will be the same as ISQC1, focusing on one of the elements of this quality management system, being the acceptance and continuance. I have put all other 8 elements here just for us to discuss, so that it's not the first time you've ever seen them, but I wouldn't go and spend too much time on each. If you get a question, you have now seen that there are 8 elements of this quality management system, and you can go into that under the requirements and go to the application paragraphs to find anything that you need to answer the questions. So the first part of this quality management system is probably the most important part of the system itself, because it explains how they've gone about setting up the components of the system, which are these 8, and what you need to do for each of these 8. So it says it's the firm's risk assessment process. And what they're saying here is, for each of these components, governance and leadership, that's something they need in their business. How they should go about accepting and continuing with clients and engagements. What they should do with regards to the ethical requirements, because they are auditors and therefore would have to comply with ethical requirements. The engagement performance, what should they do? What should they do with regards to information and communicating within their business and even externally? Resources, how do they go about ensuring they have the best resources and allocate the best resources where needed, and monitoring and remediation. So guys, these are the elements of a system they believe a firm should have and consider in order for the firm to operate and run at a high quality level. And so in their risk assessment process, they say the first thing in all of these components that needs to be considered is, what is the quality objective? What are we trying to achieve in governance and leadership with regards to setting a quality standard? What are we trying to achieve in the acceptance and continuance of clients in setting a quality standard? So what is our objective here for this specific element? But that objective needs to be quality related. It must be at a high standard. It can't just be my objective to govern and lead. And then I need to consider, what are the risks, the quality risks in trying to achieve that objective for each of these, guys. And then when we find risks, what are the responses? So for the engagement performance, what are the quality objectives we need to define for this engagement to perform at the level we expect? What are the risks that we could then face to achieve those objectives, and how could we respond? Okay, so for each of those elements, the first component of this quality management system, the firm's risk assessment process, sets the steps to follow for each. Like I said, I want to focus on acceptance and continuance, but I'll just discuss under governance and leadership. They say you need to define what are the objectives for your quality governance and leadership. Obviously, governance and leadership is going to be your partners. and they are going to be responsible to ensure that this firm and that this quality management system is governed and lead by example. They need to ensure that they have quality in their operations and lead for the rest of the staff. Acceptance and continuance we are going to get to. The ethical requirements, guys, I'm going to add this here because I'm going to discuss them with the acceptance and continuance of clients, but it is that the entire firm needs to adhere to ethical requirements at all times. What are those ethical requirements? They come from the Code of Professional Conduct. Okay, we all know that, guys. You are attempting to become CAs. You know you're going to have to comply with the ethical requirements in everything that you do, and the code tells you how to. So, in a firm where we have got clients, where we have got staff, where we've got goals, everything must be done adhering to the ethical requirements. Engagement performance, so this is now, once we have accepted the engagement, how should we perform? Who should be involved? What are the objectives? Where do the risks lie? Information and communication is just purely what information do they have and how do they need to communicate it with internal and external people. So it could be within the audit team, it could be within the audit firm, it could be external parties. Resources. This has got to do with their HR, human resources. But not only has it been left at human resources, how they go about hiring, training, ensuring that their resources are first hired at the correct level, but then maintain that level so that the quality that they produce is at the standard they require. But it also goes and discusses technical resources and intellectual. So anything that they have developed, their manuals are part of the resources, and those can be used. So at what level should they be maintained? And then monitoring and remediation, monitoring of this quality management system. Who is going to be responsible? How often do they need to evaluate it? Obviously, it's going to be annually to make sure that this is operating at the level they want so that the firm is solid. Because we saw before, where the firm is not doing everything that they expect, or partners or team members are not doing what is expected, the firm is who's going to be held responsible. Okay, I said to you, I want to focus here on acceptance and continuance, and then we will include the ethical requirements too. So let's look at that. So paragraph 30 deals with the firm having to establish a quality objective for addressing the acceptance and the continuance of clients or engagements. So it's ultimately the firm setting about the boundaries that they want for when a partner wants to go and accept a client or engagement. What are the parameters in which the partner needs to operate? And they've broken it into three things. They say that these objectives must be based on the integrity of the client. So we are going to have to go and look at the integrity of the client to determine whether you want to be associated with this client. In addition to that, it needs to be based on the firm's ability to perform the engagements in accordance with the professional standards and the applicable legal and regulatory requirements. And when we break this down, guys, you're going to see that it's going to be the professional standards in terms of their ability and the professional or regulatory requirements in terms of their ethical abilities. Can they comply with the ethical requirements? And then thirdly, based on the financial and operational priorities of the firm. So in deciding whether to accept or not, they've got to consider, is there going to be a benefit in accepting this client financially and operational, but is that benefit going to be worth taking on the client for the fee or not? Okay, what you will have seen previously, guys, is the integrity considerations of a client. That's the same as what needed to happen when it was ISQC1. The firm's ability is the same as what needed to happen in terms of the old ISQC1. Can the firm, can the team meet the requirements for this engagement based on their capabilities and the competence and sufficiency of them? The new thing is just the financial and operation priorities. So don't, in deciding whether to accept or not, only look at the gain, financial or operational gain. We must consider, is this a client that meets the first two first, 1 and 2, before we accept based on the gain that's happening. All right, so when looking at the client, do you want to be associated with that client, guys? The things that need to be considered are the reputation of the client. Do they have a good reputation in the industry? Do they have a good social media reputation? These are the things we need to look at, because linking with them means our reputation is at risk as a firm. The nature of their operations. Are they in an industry that we as an audit firm don't necessarily want to be associated with? Or are they in an industry that we are very happy to be? They go green, yay, we all about, let's go green. I want to be associated with them. The attitude, are they positive, or is there unethical behavior behind the owners, the management of that client? Are they trying to put scope limitations in place? You can take on this engagement, but you can't have access to these people with this information. Now remember, guys, this is not looking at a specific engagement. When we're looking at ISQM1, it's about putting a policy ultimately in place for the partners to consider. So when a partner wants to go and look at accepting a client, he's got to come back to this policy document component of the system for quality management and see, do any of these requirements fall into this engagement? So is the client trying to do a scope limitation? Okay, yes, then we are concerned with the integrity. It's a client I shouldn't accept. Okay, so this is just what's going to be in the firm's policy manual documents, helping, guiding the partners when it comes to should they accept or not. And what is the reason for the new, if it's a new engagement? So we've been offered an engagement. Why have we been offered? What happened to the previous auditors? Did they resign because they don't have capacity? Did they resign because of disagreements with the client? And then that could indicate the client is lacking integrity. When we look at the auditors, again, this is in the firm's policy, so that when the partner now comes to decide whether he should accept an engagement and he's got his audit team that he wants to look at, he needs to just go and have a look at what does the firm say I must consider before I'm comfortable that this team can take on this engagement. So firstly, the ethical requirements. Guys, those ethical requirements you are only going to find in the CPC and ISA 200, as we've seen above. They no longer include them in ISQM1. So you have to actually go to ISA 200 or the CPC for those ethical requirements. But you should know them, and we'll look at them next, so don't stress. I'm going to say CPC, but I'm going to say next slide. Then looking at the ability of the staff, the people that want to be put onto the engagement. Do they have knowledge or experience with the industry of the client? Do they have knowledge or experience with the regulatory requirements of the client? Okay, so if the team that you want to put in place has audited a similar client in a similar industry, then they will have had knowledge and experience of both. That's a good set of people to have on your team. A consideration of whether experts are required and whether you can get the experts, technical or non-technical. So actually with regards to specialized knowledge in an accounting area. So can you get the experts that are required? And then what is the deadline for this audit? Is there sufficient time and sufficient staff to be able to meet that deadline? These are the considerations a partner must look at. These are the firm's requirements. And then finally, the financial and operational priorities of the firm. I've said gains versus values. So is there a gain? Yes, we're going to get the financial gain or an operational gain, but it's going to affect our values. We actually shouldn't be accepting this engagement based on the ethical requirements or the integrity of the client. So you can't just do it for financial or operational gain. It must be beneficial also for the firm. And also a consideration here is the fee too low for the work that is required? Okay, the ethical requirements, guys, I've said on the next slide. So here they are. Paragraph 29 says you need to have quality objectives for those ethical requirements, and it refers you to the code. Here are the fundamental principles out of the code: integrity, objectivity, confidentiality, professional competence and due care, professional behavior, and then independence. So before accepting an engagement, the partner needs to make sure that he has considered the ethical requirements that the firm says you have to. And here are the ethical requirements at a minimum that the firm says you have to adhere to. You, as well as the team, must meet the fundamental principles and independence. And guys, we've seen this already in the CPC. And we need to answer these questions using the same framework we do when we answer CPC questions. The conceptual framework, where you first discuss the threat to either the fundamental principle, so that's what that is, or independence. And then you've got to discuss the significance of it. And then safeguards. And all of this will be in the CPC. So it's important that you understand all the different circumstances the CPC has that threaten the fundamental principles or independence. And then it's easy enough in a question where you see that circumstance. Oh, the partner is related to the financial manager, or the partner used to be the financial manager at the client that is now the partner. Or they want to do hiring work as well as auditing, or tax work as well as then auditing the tax calculations. What are the threats? They are there in the CPC. They will say, these are the threats in this situation. This is the significance of it. These are the safeguards, or there are no safeguards. So all we're saying here is that a firm needs to constantly adhere to the ethical requirements, and its staff now know that there is a policy that has objectives saying you must adhere to the ethical requirements. Okay, so that's where I would focus on ISQM1. We'll quickly go into the standard now, and I'll show you what I've highlighted, and you can then actually go and highlight according to what I've put in Called Campus. But before we do that, one thing that I do actually just want to touch on is that in the standard, it tells you for which audit client the auditors need to get an engagement quality control reviewer to review the audit. And it is said that if the audit client is a listed entity, or if it's required by law that this audit is subject to engagement quality review, or if it's an appropriate response to a quality risk. And the quality risk is affecting the quality objective. So remember when we looked at that risk assessment process, okay? For each of the components, they've got to look at the quality objective and whether there's a quality risk to meet that objective. And if there is, they need to come up with a response. So if a response is to get this audit reviewed by an engagement quality control reviewer, then that is a requirement that there must be an engagement quality control reviewer. Why is that important, guys? Because there's another standard, ISQM2, which addresses quality control reviewers. Okay, and that is here. All I've said here is it addresses appointing an eligible engagement quality control reviewer to perform an objective evaluation of the judgments and the conclusions of the audit. I don't want to go into much more about that standard. When I discuss it, when we go and actually look at the standard, you'll see what I've highlighted. But ultimately, if you are going to get a reviewer to come review the work, that reviewer is going to have to meet the same requirements that the audit team has to meet. So, comply with the ethical requirements and must be capable, competent to do so. So what were the things for capable and competent? Knowledge of an industry, experience with the industry, knowledge of the regulatory requirements, and so on. All right, guys, so that is your ISQM2. So how are these standards often tested? What are the misconceptions? ISQM1, or previously ISQC1, was often considered a pre-engagement standard. But it's true in that before accepting an engagement, the firm has to have quality management systems. So from that element, yes, but it's not only addressing the pre-engagement process or a policy on pre-engagement process. It's addressing how a firm in itself has to have quality processes and procedures so that the firm is of a quality, recognized of a quality standard. People want to have that firm taking on their audit because they've got a good reputation. Okay, so it needs to be in place before any acceptance of any audit, but the whole standard itself addresses the entire firm's policies, the entire firm's manual, instruction manual for taking on audits and what needs to happen in order to continue to take on and ensure that the audit in itself from start to finish is of a quality nature, not just how we go about accepting. There's only one policy that deals with the accepting in ISQM1, but there were 8 components of that quality system. Okay, so it is policies and procedures, but it deals with the firm, the structure, the backbone of the firm, what the firm stands by and stands for, how they go about getting and employing staff and ensuring staff are at the correct level, so that when they do accept an engagement, it is at the correct level. Having said that though, how is it often tested? It is tested in a pre-engagement capacity. So there will be information about accepting a client and you sitting there going, geez, why are they accepting this client? They clearly lack integrity. They clearly don't have enough resources in the team to take on this engagement. They're not competent and capable. They can't comply with the ethical requirements. And the question will then say, what is wrong with the firm's quality management system here? And you will then have to go and say, okay, there's an acceptance and continuance component to the quality management system. And in that component, it says that the firm must make sure they've looked at the client's integrity. Oh, here's all the instances where they've accepted this client, but there's these examples of lacking integrity. There's these examples of where the staff are not competent and there's not enough staff or enough time. So I actually have to go and apply the issues in accepting the engagement to the components of acceptance and continuance of that quality management system. Okay, so I go into that paragraph and I find all the issues and I link the information in the scenario back to what the policy is supposed to address. Alright, okay, let's go into ISQM1 and ISQM2 just so you can see this.